rainbow coloured pencils that I've got, so I've just gone for the classic sort of, rainbow colours. And we're going to just start a doodle building out from one corner and going across, and I'll do as much of it as I can, but then I want to show you the colour or the tonal application that we're going to do to kind of give this quite funky sort of, it's going to be like a rainbow ombre kind of effect, but it's not going to be just your standard colouring from one side to the other in the rainbow colours, so we're going to have some fun with it. So we're going to start off just as a sort of like, I'm going to do like a sort of rosette pattern on this side. I'm going to build out a bit, and so we're going to start sort of in here and we'll move out that way. So I'm literally going to start with one circle, which is going to be my sort of starting off point. So that's, I'm using this one is a 0.3, so again I would go for your medium range, 4, 3, something like that, in the middle-ish of the range, just again, so you've got the old thing of you can always go bigger, then you can always go smaller. And then I'm going to turn that just into a very simple daisy flower, just by putting my daisy bumps round it, just like the proper, do you remember The Good Life? That used to have a sort of fantastic 70s daisy in the animation at the beginning, and I always think of that for some reason when I drew daisy flowers like that. So I've got my daisy sort of centering like that. Then we're going to do some elongated shapes, but what's quite important for this pattern is what I want to try and do is double up on my shapes each time. So I mean that whenever I do a shape, I want to try and put like a second, at least one, if not two, second sort of lines inside to give it that sort of double edge kind of feel, because we're going to use that later to help us kind of blend these rainbow colours in. So I'm just doing my elongated petals. I'm going to do them in the sort of north, south, east, west positions, as it were, around there first, and then I'm going to come back and do the in-between ones. So those are in there, and then doing those in between. So they're sort of like little mini rainbows inside, but I'm going to go in and fill all of those in betweens. Then I'm going to go back in and do my secondary loops inside, going all the way round. And you'll see later why we want to have these kind of frame shapes inside here. I think we're going to get some more, let's go back, these daisy bumps, they need some more, so some little smaller ones on the inside, and there's always room to go back and subdivide and break them up more, so you can always go back and add some more. We could do a third one into these big ones, and without any problem, we can always add more in. Then I'm going to do like a sort of circle round, but I'm not going to worry. It's not going to be a perfect circle. I don't want it to be. So I'm just doing a sort of wibbly, gentle wobbles, not massive wobbles, but like sort of gentle wibbles round, just sort of bringing my way round to kind of give that a sort of circular base. And I find it easy to do it in two halves because it's actually quite hard to keep my hand going round in the same position, but as long as they roughly meet up. And the old trick is when you're coming round like this to meet up with an existing point, don't look at your pen end, but look at the point you're headed towards, like you're looking at your destination, and you'll find that much more easily, much more naturally, your pen will end up where you want it to be. If you try and watch the end of your pen, you tend to sort of wibble off into the distance and get a bit confused. So we've got this sort of nice sort of rosette shape around here, and we can add some line work. And again, I'm going to sort of start off by almost doing the quarters, and then you can then decide if you want to, then you could then subdivide. So then we're going to go half of each of those sections, and you can keep on going smaller and smaller with this depending on how many divisions you want, how thin you want to get. But if you sort of do it evenly like this, sort of breaking it up in between, it means if you want to stop, you can sort of do it in rounds. You can do one round, then another round, another round, and then you're going to know that you've got the pieces roughly equal. You're not going to sort of get left behind, hopefully, and sort of get out of sync too much. So that's sort of like, we can go further and further. You could go completely until you had them all completely divided up into whole sun rays of lines if you wanted to. We could maybe take some of the sections, so maybe in a couple of them just break them up into thinner lines like that. Just gives a slightly different feel. Just might be something to try. Again, I'm sort of going sort of roughly opposites so that I don't get too, so I don't want two of these next to each other really. So if I sort of go roughly opposites, then it sort of will hopefully avoid that from happening. So we've got those sections there. As I say, we can always come back and add more into that as we go. Then I'm going to do some leaf shapes, kind of like growing out of here. So I'm going to do some long teardrop shapes as if they were sort of leaves. Some of them can be overlapping. Some of them can be on top. Some of them can be underneath. So some of them are on top. And we can just do a range of kind of long shapes like that. And then we're going to do the same thing as down here. The important bit is to do the inside again. So, and of course if they're overlapping, you might not see all of the inside. It might just sort of disappear behind because it's tucked behind the ones in front. So let's just move, and just sort of gives you that little bit of extra dimension to kind of play with a bit later. And I might do a couple more of these popping up behind like little faces. You do them a little bit shorter, don't do them as long, and then it definitely looks like you've got rows happening, and there's sort of like layers of ones in front and ones behind. And then come back in again and do your liner, so you've got that little extra space to kind of play with, which we'll see what that's going to do later. Right, then I think I'm going to do some, I want to get some bigger shapes in up here, so I'm going to do some nice long elongated shapes like that, sort of like rabbit ear leaves. And just sort of like a spray coming up on the side there. And I'm going to break these up into stripes, so all coming up into that top point like that. So start on one side and then come back on the other like that. Just follow that shape down. It just sort of helps to give that some movement through, and then I can do a few more lines, and then they do become quite sort of leafy, just to get like the veins and that sort of rib feel that you get in the sort of quite architectural leaf shapes. So I can just bring those through there, and then we're going to come back down here, going to add some more down here. So I think down here I'm going to do some like this shape, but just sort of smaller. So just very simple half moon daisy bump shapes. Just sort of coming around, just to add a bit of different scale. You don't want everything to be the same shape and the same sort of feel. So I'm just do some little short ones, and again line them round. And just to make these stand out to be a bit different, I'm just going to put a very simple little dividing line through the middle like that, and that should give you, just makes them a bit different, gives us something else that we can work with later. And let's do a few more of those. There's a nice little crowd of these, sort of like the way you get little mushrooms all crowding up a tree trunk, or lots of little tiny leaves and florets. So I'm going to do all of the empty, sort of the outlines first, sort of empty, and then I'm going to fill them in. Now of course you can go in, when you sort of like, you might want to have a go yourself, you can go in and do more divisions. You can break them up smaller again. You can put extra patterns in when you've got a sense of what the colouring, how we're going to colour them. But for the moment, keep it relatively simple, because the colouring is going to be a little bit more controlled and a bit more detailed than previously. So, let's not give ourselves too much work to do on a Tuesday night. So let's just get a nice little cluster of sort of shapes coming in here. I'm working relatively quickly because I want to get onto the colouring bits, and I want to have a decent amount of pattern to colour to show you. Obviously you can keep on growing your pattern to fill the whole page again if you want to, or travel off into the wild blue yonders once you've got an idea. But I'm hoping to get enough pattern down so that I can then show you what the colouring is going to work on here. I'm going to put a nice big leaf shape. To do this, I'm going to do, this is, if you want to imagine, this is going to be your central spine, I suppose, of your leaf. So if you just do a nice sort of, with a slight curve, quite a big line to begin with going up, and then that's going to be that sort of like where this big leaf is going to grow. And then I'm going to take a line coming out there, and from that point and then opening up, and that suddenly becomes a great big leaf shape like that in that sort of foliage. And then I can break that up by doing some veins, and it always works to sort of, remember they're always going to be going upwards, so they come from the spine and they grow up to the outside edge each time. And they don't have to match up. That's the beauty of leaves, because they rarely match up perfectly because they're not made in a factory. So if they don't match up, in fact, try not to make them match up. It's quite difficult. At the moment I say that, try not to make them match up. It's really hard not to make them perfectly symmetrical. It's like if I say to you, don't think of a pink elephant, you're all thinking of a pink elephant right now. It's one of those weird things that your brain does. It's why we shouldn't be left around big red buttons saying don't push. And I'm going to do a little, I'm going to do another big leaf here. But I want to do a few more of these sort of shapes, I think, around here. So I'm going to do, let's do a sort of snaky spiral. Well, not really spiral, just sort of a snaky ribbon kind of coming off and maybe curling round. So make that sort of double, and then we can do another one that's sort of reflecting it. Give it a curl and bring it round, and then I think just divide that up with some half moon lines kind of coming through, just so we've got somewhere, because it'll be useful for travelling colour along sort of thing. And then I can do another one of my big leaves here. So this time when I'm going to draw my spine, it's going to come from behind this sort of cluster and then underneath that spiral and out again. So that sort of shows you where the big spiral, the big leaf spine is going to come. So then I think, right, I can take from the point, I can then bring that to disappear behind there, and the same thing to disappear behind that point there. So that gives me again another big leaf, and that's going to be, then it's time to add the veins in. And again, trying not to always make them match. They can match. I mean, you know, there's no hard and fast rules with this. That's why it's so lovely. It's your doodle, so you can, this is your world where you can decide what shapes you want to do. And if they don't look like mine, that's brilliant. And in fact, that's what we're really aiming for, is for everyone to be able to take their doodle off into different directions. Right, so thinking about it, I think I want to bring some shapes sort of coming this way now. I think I don't want to have it all going upwards. I want to bring something coming down here. So let's do some of those longer ones, but let's give them a bit of a twist or a sort of slight bend. And maybe as they go round, they can slightly get shorter and shorter each time, and then it's got a sort of frond-like kind of feel, sort of coming round that way. And let's put one up here. Let's get a bit of a curl happening on this one. So we can take it round, and maybe it can, oh look, it's becoming a curlicue. If I do kind of a shape like that, you can do a kind of curly shape and another kind of curliness happening around there. So that's sort of like a bit done. Then again, I want to make sure to give it an outline. So they're going to have an outline the same, and if they're disappearing behind, the outline can disappear behind as well. Just sort of, and I've got to think about how I'm going to do this on the curlicues. Yeah, I'm building up to it. I'm creeping up to them bit by bit. Didn't start with them because I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So let's do that one. That one's quite straightforward. That one kind of fits in like that there. So this one, slightly more tricky, but I'm going to come up along that line, pop round the end and disappear like that. And then another one coming up and round. And honestly, if you can't work out how to do it, don't worry about it. It can live without it. Or maybe you can find a different way of doing it, you know. It's all fine. It'll be fine. And then I'm going to put a dividing line up, like a margin, I suppose, or again a spine. It's quite a good way of looking at it. And you could go back and you could break those up into smaller shapes if you wanted to, depending on how intricate you're feeling. Right, okay. Oh, let me just see if I can get my camera a bit closer. That might... It's difficult because it has quite a short... is that better? It's just got quite a short focal length, unfortunately, because all these cameras are designed not for doing art tutorials, but for making you look nice on Zoom, you know. So no one can tell you've got your slippers on underneath. So they're not sort of, you don't get, it's really hard to get it very crisp. I can see it's slightly fuzzy off to one side already. It's tricky. It's a tricky one. I need to invest in a proper, like, super duper camera, but I can never find one that, even when I buy quite expensive ones, they still do this thing. Right, so I'm going to put another sort of flower centre, as it were, thinking a little bit like a flower arrangement. I want another kind of feature flower kind of coming through here. So I'm going to do a little cluster of circles to be my sort of centre point. And just a little group that's going to sort of roughly go round in a circle. Just to be like a little hard centre of flowers there. And maybe draw, when you've got them all down, you could do it the other way around. You could draw a circle and fill it with, a big circle and fill it with smaller ones. Whichever way you're comfortable. And then I'm going to do long petals on this one. So again, just that sort of classic, very long, like chrysanthemum sort of shape. I'm trying to not mask it too much with my hand. And just do the compass points first. I'm going to have to mask it with that to get that one up there. There we go. And then we can go round. And you can either just fill straight in between. So you've got another one coming out behind. Or you can sort of work around, like going round the clock and slightly overlapping them. It's just completely up to you. Both will work and feel quite good to do. There we go. So with long petals, and then again, this time I'm going to go on the outside just for something different. So just following the shape on the outside. You might find that works better for you. It doesn't. Both ways is fine. Just to give it that extra outline. And give it some presence on the page. And it's lovely because you start to sort of when you start doing doodles, you start to get quite interested in flowers because they're always so handy to draw in doodle form. So you can kind of, like, as you're walking about and going around the garden, you start to notice the way flowers are put together, and you can find some quite interesting shapes in them which you can bring back to the doodle. And leaves and things like that. Ferns are fantastic. If you start growing, if you ever sort of grow ferns in your garden or you see them, they are just the most incredible structures, and they're great fun to try and draw, and you can sort of bring elements of them into some of the doodle patterns. So it's quite good to have maybe take some photos and have them as a sort of scrapbook. See, once I've got that quite nice spread out flower, I can then do a slightly different shape in between, just with a sort of simple half moon bump, I think, just coming around. And that sort of could be a second row of petals. It could also be leaves, could just be doodles. And I might do a couple more of those again, just bring them into, once I've got one in, I can do like a couple of extra rainbow ones over the top. And the aim for this is to sort of build up a whole surface of doodle as we did before, but then what we're going to do is carry our sort of colour treatment across it, so both working on the detail but also kind of keeping an eye on the bigger picture. So to get it to sort of work, I want to try and get every bit of the surface filled in. I'm not going to manage to do the whole page, but I certainly want to work in sort of something that's happening in around here. So I think we could do we want some shapes that are going to come across and maybe join or sort of fill in that gap. So just some curvy lines, and then they can break and come into leaf shapes that are sort of curling round. And then I'm going to give them their outlines again. That's right, so that sort of like comes in through there. And then I want to bring some other things, so let's have some, what other shapes can we get in? We can sort of get some curly shapes kind of maybe coming in and around. And we can do our favourite circles. If you do a circle on this one, do another little one inside, so it's immediately got like a little outline lurking inside. And then you can put a spine on that one and give it its sort of outline between. So I'm hoping to sort of really build up, so we don't want to have any gaps. So if you've got a space, not sure what to do with it, well, we can always put some curved lines into it. We can fit a circle, because you can squash them in anywhere, and maybe put like a second echoing line into the shape like that. Sort of find your shape and copy it again, spiral it again. So like here I might draw around that off again and perhaps break that up into sections, something like that. And then if you want to do another long leaf, bring another sort of piece of spine out like that. So you can sort of like use these as a way of sort of pushing the pattern forward, because you can kind of direct your spine where you want it to go and then go back and turn it into a leaf just by doing that sort of very simple elongated triangle shape. And then I can do my divisions for the veins going through. There we go, just sort of bring those in. So that's sort of got quite a nice bit of density there. I think I want to do a bit on this side because we're missing a bit of action over here, I think. So let's focus in on that side. Right, so let's go. We often do a lot of these sort of rounded shapes. So let's try sort of maybe doing something that's doing the other way. Let's give it some inverse or convex. No, concave it is. That's because cave goes in. Sort of concave shape going that way. Let's see what that does. So that's quite a sort of spiky edge, but it's given us a different kind of feel. So let's follow that. And with this one, I'm going to disappear my outline up into those points, just to give it a different kind of feel. So the outline is still there, but it's just changing its feel by having it disappear up, as opposed to sort of being the same all the way across. And I think, oh well, look, I definitely, don't you feel that wants to have a line going up into it like that? So it's like a nice division. So if you find it hard to go up into the point, then start at the point and come away from it like that. So it's got that sort of maybe like a dragon crest kind of feel. And that just gives us a nice, again, dividing line to work with, which we can explore later. Let's get some of our longer shapes in. So let's put some spines in first, just a couple. So we can put a spine coming down there and then turn that into a long leaf, sort of by almost like a banana shape, sort of coming down like that. And then again, and if you want to give yourself a little wiggle on the spine, let's see what that does. And then you sort of have to follow that as well. So your leaf has a bit of a wiggle to it as well. You can just sort of throw that in and see what kind of shapes it makes you want to do. And maybe this one, because you can kind of curl it into a space and then you go, right, okay, great, I can come back now and make that a bit more three-dimensional. Like that. And then I can go in and I want to put my kind of veins in. So again, just almost like chevron lines, I suppose. I'm just going to slightly vary the size so they're not being totally regular, as I think it just gives it a slightly more leaf-like quality. And same here, just sort of build that side round. And same with this one. Remember, always sort of let them grow towards the point of the leaf, because that's the way they always grow. And however bizarre your leaf shape is, if you follow that tradition or that sort of thing of just bringing them from the centre out upwards or towards the point as they come to the edge, it will always sort of make more sense of them, and they'll start to look like a sort of leaf shape. Even if you're not doing a sort of nature study, it's still gives it the right kind of feel. So let's just get those on this side. Just checking the time. Right, okay, so I'm going to do about 10 minutes more of doodling, or the drawing bit of it anyway, and then I'll sort of try and demonstrate the colour, and we'll see how that's going to work, and we can sort of then go on from there. Right, so I'm going to do some curly. I want something curly up here. I think I want like some of the curly, spirally, like those ones. We sort of looked at some of those last week, didn't we? And they're on some of the other tutorials. So just some nice spirals coming up around this side, I think. It's always good to work with odd numbers, I think, when you're doing a design. I'm going to now double this round again, because there's something about doing two of everything. If you run the risk always of making it look like a pair of eyes. And so there's something visually much more pleasing about, I think, odd numbers. It's always a good tip if you've ever tried your hand at flower arranging, which I do the odd class in as well. And it's always the curse of the flower arranging is to spend hours doing those beautiful arrangements and then take a step back and realise that you've just got two big sort of froggy eyes looking back at you, like usually two great big flower heads that just look like a face, and then you can't stop seeing it. So I think I'm just going to do some. I'm going to do some of these small ones. I'm going to put them in around this side, and then having just gone on about how we don't want two great big things because it can look like eyes, I'm going to put a third one in up here so we don't have that kind of it looks like a face looking at me thing happening. So I'm just going to put some like a little cluster of the little tiny ones all kind of crowding in together around here. And I'm going to do all the outlines first, and then I'm going to put the sort of the second line in. So I'm going to do all the basic shapes in. So they're all going to be crowding in here. It's nice to have a range of different heights and textures together. So where you've got lots of long ones, think about putting in these little short ones, because it just helps break up the surface that you're working with. So then I can put in its extra liner in. It's not really an outline, is it? It's sort of an inline, but I don't know. I must think of a cunning way of describing it, but I haven't yet. But put a second line in, that'll have to do for now. Just loop those round so they've got like their little faces coming through. And then just a little margin, just to add a bit of another little spine really. So this time we're putting the spine in last as opposed to putting the spine in first. There we go. So that's just filled in a bit more information on that side. And then I think we want something happening up here at least. So again, let me just move up so we don't get too much fuzzy. There we go. And then we're going to put, I think we'll put another sort of, I'm trying to think of a nice centre that we can do. I think let's do a spiral centre. So I'm just going to do a little snail spiral. And that's going to kind of be almost like the sort of when you look down inside a rose, you get that sort of spiral feel. And then I'm going to do these sort of triangular shapes. So like a sort of heart shape almost, but sort of as if the heart shape is tucked underneath that row, that sort of spiral. And then if I do another one again, and I slightly tuck it under the one before, so you get that sort of slight, let me come in a bit closer, you can see you get that sort of slight overlap kind of feel. Sorry, that's better. So you can see that sort of, it just starts to get that sort of rose quality. So think about doing like as if you were sort of tucking a triangle or a heart shape underneath. So the next one again, if I start on this side, just to give it a little round there, up into a peak and round, and then disappear it behind the one that you've already drawn, you see, and that starts giving you this kind of overlap kind of feel. So again on this side, around the edge there, up to a point, and then round and tucking back into the petal. And then you can keep on sort of going, and then when you get to this stage you get the sort of curved edge and then tuck it in around, and that sort of looks a bit like a rose. So I'm going to go round again and each time as you go round, if you do each one slightly bigger, you'll probably quite naturally do it without thinking about it, and it'll start to spiral outwards. And they don't have to all follow, they can all overlap at different points, and you'll find that quite naturally you might think, oh, actually I want to start one in a bit further back to get the sort of point of the petal in a different place. And you can just very slowly build that up, because they don't sit in kind of even ranks. They do have this sort of lovely spiral quality. And I can just bring it around. It has a feeling a bit of that sort of Tudor rose, which always can look quite strange until you realise it's actually based on the dog rose, which is the wild rose, because of course they wouldn't have had all the cultivated roses to the extent that we do now at that time. So their main idea of the rose was the dog rose. So once you've got your sort of rose head at the size you want to, then to get some extra detail in, I might go and do just a little line down some of the petals. Can you see if I just let it come out and not quite touch the tip, just sort of coming from the middle of the petal, and then just let it sort of fade out. It just somehow gives it that little crease that you sometimes get inside a petal. there is other ways you can do to get that kind of curly over edge petal, but that's maybe for another tutorial. So we'll just stick with doing a little line up the centre of those petals like that. And then we want to do a rose leaf sort of shape maybe coming into that. So we're going to start with the spine in the same kind of way. So just do a line out where I want my petal to come. So that's going to be the spine of my leaf. And then instead of just doing a plain sweep, which you can do, I think I'll do, what you tend to do is you do a plain on one side like that. So that gives you the shape. And then this one, just give it a slight zigzaggy feel, because the rose leaf has that slightly serrated edge like it's been cut with pinking shears. So another one here again, just do the sort of spine with a nice curl to it first. And if you're feeling brave, you can do all of the leaf edge with the sort of zigzag feel. Just bring a zigzag line down to meet that point, and it kind of gives it that rose-like quality. And then again, you can do some branching off veins on that, just to give it, to definitely say that it's a doodle, but it's a leaf doodle. You know, you can still make it reminiscent of something, even when we're doing crazy in our crazy doodle world. And then I'm going to bring, I think, another leaf maybe down on this side. I think I want a third one coming in, and I want to hopefully get it joined up to this sort of part of the rest of the pattern as well before we start looking at the colours. We're not going to be doing any particularly naturalistic colours on this, so although we're taking all this time to make something look a bit like a rose, when we're finished it's not going to have a natural rose colour, and not this time anyway. That's for another one. So that's got those sort of in there, and then I'm going to do some of our long leaves. So I want to sort of bring some of the shapes to connect them so it doesn't look too separate. So I'm going to do some of those long leaves maybe sort of growing out of that section coming down towards that design, and then do their double line like that, just sort of tucking in there. And then what else we could do, we could bring maybe some of those wiggles. Let's do a wiggle kind of coming down and round, and double it up again just to bring it into the pattern like that. And then we can put some more shapes, maybe just some spirals, or not spirals, the sort of teardrops, but kind of growing and elongating round, and they could come from a small point and they can overlap as well, so you get shapes working together like that. And I want to kind of fill in this gap here. I don't want there to be any, eventually I want it all to be an all over pattern of kind of foliage, so I don't want any gaps in the background because we want to be able to colour all of it. Here we go, so I can just fill in there. Right, so I think I've got to the point of the evening where I very much need to get some tea. It's as ever been put just fractionally out of reach on the side of my work surface, so I'm going to grab it in a second, have a slurp, and then what we'll do is, that's as far as I've got with the pattern. Now obviously I would probably want to cover all of the page with the pattern before I start the colour. It's not essential though, so I'm going to, oh look, there's a hole there that needs a circle. It's calling to me. I'm going to show you how we're going to do the colour, how we're going to get this sort of rainbow ombre feel to kind of go through the pattern. And then I'll get this bit coloured in, and then we can, if we've got more time, we'll keep expanding the pattern together and keep adding the colour. Because you can choose, there's different ways of working, you know, you can decide to do the whole page and then apply colour, or you can start off with a colour and then see if that affects how they want the rest of the page to grow. So I'm going to very quickly mute my mic and grab a quick slurp of tea. Right, there we go. It's something about the warmth of tea, which I think helps more than just water when you're talking a lot. Right. So here are our sort of flowers. So what we're going to do, we're going to use the rainbow colours, but we're not going to do a sort of conventional rainbow sort of effect. We want to imagine that you sort of have to think about it as if there were stripes of rainbow kind of going across the whole of the page, and this has sort of like been imposed on this pattern. So I'm going to keep my rainbow to sort of, it's going to graduate through the pattern, but I'm going to like take a bit of rainbow colour all the way across here. What I'm going to do is on each area of colour, so if I'm going to start with, if I would normally start with like a yellow and orange, but that's really difficult to see, so I'm going to start the other way around. I'm going to start with the indigo and the violet. So I've got a very deep kind of well, sort of like dark bluish colour and a purple colour, so I'm going to sort of start with those, and then I'm going to sort of move out from either direction. So if you're not sure what I'm babbling about, which is quite possible, let me show you a bit first, and then you can kind of see how we sort of take it from there. So where I've got this, I'm going to start from here. So I'm going to imagine that across the page, all this bit of pattern across here is going to be combinations of purpley blue. Okay, so I'm going to choose an area to start from, and that's going to be my indigo and violet kind of bit. So, for example, where I've got these little flower faces in here, I can add my dark blue into some of them. And just, I want to think about where the colour is sort of going. So I'm sort of slightly keeping the dark blue into the shaded effect, kind of in here. So I'm using it sort of where the outline bits come down and sit in front of the others. Let me get my camera in even closer so hopefully you can see. It doesn't like being close, it sort of like bounces back again. I hope that's sort of just showing you, I hope we're sort of seeing that. I can turn my light up a little bit to see if that helps. Put a bit more light on things. There we go. So it doesn't matter the tops are whited out because we're just looking at this little section here. Let's get that on. Right, okay, so what we're sort of hopefully seeing is where I've got the outlines are sort of like the horseshoe shape. I'm just putting a little bit of the dark blue into the bottom of them because it's going to add like a little bit of a shadow effect just sort of down the bottom. So I'm using my darkest, my sort of indigo kind of colour, and then I'm going to come back in with the sort of pale lilac-y purple, but the violet, and that's going to be in the sort of faces section here, but I want to get some light in there as well, so I'm going to leave a little tiny bit of white at the top of each of those sort of, I do think of them as little faces, just sort of little poking over the top, just to sort of bring, so they've got, just going to leave like a little sort of highlight, and then in the outline bit where I've got the very dark blue, I'm going to put some of my lilac colour down first, but then I'm going to use my dark blue just quite lightly over the top, so it's lighter but not too light. So I put a little bit of lilac down first, and then go back with a little bit of the darker colour, but lightly, so I get a slight difference. So this is my kind of bluey section that we're going to start sort of, so everything sort of like across this bit here. It doesn't have to be a very straight line, it can be just a patch that you can kind of work out from. Is going to be in my kind of indigo and violet section. So if we think about the rainbow, this, we're going to sort of move away from this section on all sides. Does that make any sense at all, what I've just said? We're going to head back through the rainbow, but we're going to sort of head that way and that way as well, through the rainbow back, as if they're sort of forming a stripe of colour. This made a lot more sense in my head than it did saying it out loud. So I'm just going to add little hints of blue into that. So if we were thinking about a rainbow, the next colourway, so we go red, orange, yellow, green, blue. So we would kind of be heading more into the sort of sky blue part of the rainbow at this stage. If you think about if you're sort of moving that way. So I'm going to put a bit more of these two colours. I want to bring them across onto some of these leaves here. So let's just tilt the camera that way a little bit. So with these ones, similar kind of idea, just not all of these, just the sort of ones that are the same sort of height of these little faces. So they're going to have if I do the lilac in first. And then sort of maybe the bottom of this one, I'm leaving it white because there's going to be a bit of blue kind of coming into this bit here. And maybe on this one, I'm going to imagine just doing that section there, because I'm going to get a bit of something different coming across here. And this bigger shape here, this is definitely going to be lilac through here. So I can sort of sketch out where I'm going first. It's one of those ones that's a bit tricky to begin with, but it'll make sense. And then if I think of my stripe coming this way across sort of horizontally, we're going to do it's sort of horizontal, it's a bit wobbly. But so this would probably have some lilac in it. And maybe this bit here would as well, because it's sort of the same height as these ones I've already done. And this part of the wiggle, like that. And then just maybe some of those three sections. So it's sort of like I'm colouring using the shapes that are here, but you can see I'm building up like a stripe going across. Maybe that's starting to make a bit more sense now that we're starting to see it. So yeah, even this background's got to have a little bit of lilac in it, because I'm just imagining doing a stripe through, and then in part of this flower here, I think those three sort of nuggets there, and maybe that loop of that flower, and then on this bigger flower, just the top of that petal, I'm going to do that in a kind of lilac colour, and then that side of it, and you can see I'm taking my stripe, you can see hopefully it's coming across the whole of the piece. So it's using the pattern but also slightly ignoring it as well. So it's working in the shapes that I've got, but at the same time it's not just colouring it like you might do with the sort of the centre of the flower being the rainbow and so on and so on. So if I just sort of can see roughly where that sort of bit of lilac is coming across there, and then I can go back with my dark one, and then all of this is going to need maybe some shading into it in these two colours. So I'm starting initially just with these two colours because it's the indigo violet bit of the rainbow. And I can blend some of and if I want to get difference in tone, this is when I'm going to start blending them together. So I might go back like we did before and put some lilac down and then go back over the top with the darker sort of purpley colour to give it a bit of variation, so it's not just a flat one colour. Like in here I can put some indigo shading in. See if I just start to bring that where it's overlapping, and here like where it's overlapping again, that's going to make that stripe through look a bit more obvious. You can kind of see where I'm drawing it. So like on these shapes here, my indigo is going to become my shadow, so I can put that in there, and then maybe on these ones just use it as if just like a colour, like it's going to shade in a pencil like you were doing tonal work, but with a colour pencil, but just use it like that. And I think it's too harsh at any point, I can always go back and use my lilac again just to kind of go over the top and blend those colours together, just sort of spread them out. Again, I'm working quite quickly, but there's loads of scope to work, with some quite patient, quite delicate shading across here, because I want this stripe to be quite identifiable with these two colours in it. So when I get onto this section here, I can, let me just slightly tilt this way. It's very hard to go across the width and get it all in focus because it doesn't like doing that. So like on this one, I can just put just use that like a tonal edge in there just to sort of shade that in. It's quite important, it's important just to take note of where you're putting this shadow, because you're going to continue it but in a different colour. That will make more sense in a minute when I show you what I mean. But you're going to do the similar thing, but same thing but different, which is what everyone wants from a good sequel. So, and again in here maybe just put a little bit of shadow kind of coming through, and where it's got some background, look, that can go quite dark sort of round in there. We can use that dark. Right, so I've got sort of, I hope you can see, if I just pull back the camera, so I'm working quite quickly, but that'll hopefully give you the idea. You can see how I've got like a stripe running through that design. So in some bits it's using the shapes exactly, and then but here it's cutting through my shapes. It's sort of ignoring them. It's sort of coming through. I think I'm going to put a little bit more dark on those edges just so we can definitely see them. But you should hopefully see that you've got this sort of stripe of, this is my indigo violet stripe going through this whole pattern. So what I've got to think about now is if I was going up and down like so from the rainbow, I'm starting at the bottom colours here, aren't I? Because you've got indigo and violet. So if we go backwards, it's indigo, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. So the next sort of one we would get into would be blue. So it'd be blue and indigo. And then, but that would also be heading, the blue would be heading a bit towards green. So what I'm going to do now is come with my blue, and I'm going to do a stripe, sort of a blue coming under here, but also coming up here as well. And then we're going to blend in some of the other colours that you've used into that blue stripe. So to begin with, if I come in a bit closer, that's showing. I'm not just going to, like, you know, I'm not just going to scribble all over the top. I do want to think a little bit about, so because my blue is kind of a shadowy colour, where I've got the shadow in the darker indigo colour, I'm going to continue that down in the blue. So remember I said think about where you've got the shadow, because like say here, you can see it on this edge here, I've gone from the indigo and I've then turned it into blue, and I can bring it up into blue as well on this side. So I'm going to bring a little bit of blue down onto these petals, and these are a different shape, so they can kind of have a blue top half like that, and then my blue stripe continues underneath where we started with those ones, just adding a little bit of blue. And it's also going to go, so like on that wiggle there, that bottom half of the wiggle, that's going to become blue. And I'm going to get some blue building up into those shapes. And to begin with, just do a light sort of colouring of blue. If you've got a shape you can follow quite easily, that's fine. Like that background there, I can tell that wants to be blue, so I can bring that in, because we can come back later and blend, do more blending and getting more, there's a sort of the gradation working quite nicely. So then these petals, like that's going to come down to be blue, and it's going to come, blue's going to come all the way through kind of here and into that end space, but of course it's also got to come above this stripe as well. So hopefully we're seeing the blue is starting to appear in a kind of band beneath the lilac-y purples, but then I want it to come, because it's sort of like spreading out from that point, so it's going to come above as well. So like the top of that leaf shape there, that's going to have blue in it, and this sort of top arch like that, and in there too. So we can just bring that in the top too. So again, imagine, I suppose, about 1/2 centimetre or a centimetre, depending on how rapid you want your change to be, of blue, top and bottom. So that's taken that through here, and then on these ones, look, you can do the outline, that's going to definitely be blue, that sort of the horseshoe kind of outline around the petals, that's definitely going to be blue all the way through there. That's it. And then into this one a little bit, and then maybe a little bit of blue down there, and just that top, and just that bit of spiral, that sort of top half of the spiral, or that inner curl there, that's going to come, and my blue's going to kind of come across to here and to here. So I've got a sort of blue section now. Hopefully you're seeing you've got like a sort of blue above and blue below. So I'm just going to put a little bit more blue in so it's a bit more obvious. You can always leave little whites to be highlights, you know, that always works. So you don't have to colour every single millimetre of the paper in one go, because you might want to come back and adjust. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a little tiny bit more lilac, and into the blue section. So where I've got blue, I'm just going to do a little hint of lilac, not very much, just a little moment of lilacness, but close to the lilac zone. So lilac goes near the lilac zone. So I can just add, because I'm trying to get a blend happening, I don't want it to be a very obvious stripe, so I'm just adding just mixing a little bit of lilac into the bottom of the blue section or the top of it, depending on, not very much, just a little hint of it just kind of coming through. And then what I'm going to do is go back into the blue section with my green colour, because obviously we go blue, and then the next colour we would hit, because we're kind of going through the rainbow backwards, we would hit green. So just on some of the edges, just to kind of blend these colours through and stop them from, so the transition point is not so hard. It's not going to be a complete stripe in a kind of knitted scarf kind of feel. So I can add a little bit of lilac in, and now I'm going to get my green pencil, and so the green is going to start coming into the bottom of the blue here and the top of and sort of the blue here. So where I've got some blue here, I can then take it into start adding some green detail, maybe using it as a shadow in this case. It depends on the colour of green that you've got, really. You know, it can become, if you think about it, eventually we're going to blend that green into yellow, because that's what we're going to go to next. So think of the green, I think, as the kind of shadowy element in this sort of section here, and we can start going below that blue into more of a greeny section. It will start hopefully to make a bit more sense. You can do, I've got them quite close together. I quite like the change happening sort of quite obviously. You can always do it over a bigger time scale. You can do a sort of space rather than really time scale, but you can do a bigger transition. But I want to sort of show you the kind of effect, so I'm going to get in there. So I'm now adding in some green into my blue section, and of course it's not written in stone. You can go back in and blend a bit more blue if you want to. It's not a problem, because you want to sort of get this sort of, so you can see a transition's happening, but maybe you can't quite tell exactly at what point everything swaps over. You know, you might say, oh, it's a bit too much white there, I might want to come back. So you're going to be swapping backwards and forwards between the colours to kind of get this nice blend of colours working through. And there's plenty of time and scope to be sent, sort of like going backwards and forwards with your pens. And of course, you know, I'm just using 7 shades of, I've literally just limited myself to 7 rainbow shades. But you might decide to go in and have like 2 or 3 green shades and expand this sort of transition between them again. But that might be for a second go. I think get used to what we're doing with this first go first, and then expand it into more loveliness as you go. So hopefully you're sort of seeing now we're getting the green, sort of like a sort of slice of agate or something, the way you get sort of variegations coming through. So my green stripe's got to come across here, so I want to put some green into some of these shapes here. You can always leave a little, but do it quite lightly, because you can go back and add other colours to blend in. You know, you might decide you need to get a bit more blue back in the blend, or something else, you know, as you're coming down. But as we're coming down into this shape, so we are using the shapes we've drawn. We're not just scribbling on top of them as they didn't exist, but we're sort of also thinking about a swathe of colour cutting across the whole design. So I'm just sort of bringing my green all the way across. So I've just about got green all the way across the bottom. I think I'm going to put a bit more onto here maybe. And then I'm going to just make sure that I've got green all the way at the top, just sort of blending in the same sort of way. And you're going to be sort of, again, dropping back between blue pencil and green pencil, and you might decide, oh no, I actually want to put a bit of lilac in there as well, because you don't want it to be like a really hard borderline. You want it to be quite nice and soft and fluid looking, and you might want to leave some white highlights as well. If you get really into doing this sort of technique, think also about leaving like a white highlight travelling across the shapes as well, so your colours give way for that sort of highlight moment. I'm sort of trying to do that on this leaf a little bit, so you can just see I'm leaving a white sort of area in the green that I've drawn, so it becomes like a highlight. But that's loads of things to sort of play with and think about. But sometimes I find it's easier to just sort of get some basic bits of colour in so that you know where you're going, and then go back and then sort of blend, like I'm going to come back with my blue pencil and maybe add a little bit of blue into some of these sections, so they're not, you know, you might get blue travelling a bit higher up into the green section, just so that it's not, it just has this sort of lovely transition from one to the other, so it's not too stark. And again, I am working quite quickly because I'm trying to sort of show you how it's going to work out, and I'm hoping that, you know, you can spend a lot more time getting some, but hopefully sort of getting this feeling of a sort of stripe running through the whole thing, but also being part of it and also not being part of it at the same time. So again, I'm just blending where I've got my green going into blue. I'm just going back over the top with some green, so that I'm changing my green so it's a more bluey green, because of course as I come away and I get more green coming in, the next colour I'm going to be introducing is some yellow, and that's going to start changing the feel of my green. It's going to be warming it up, so you can see it a lot on these nice leaves that we did with these sort of verticals ruching upwards. I can start with my sort of green at the bottom of these veins or sort of ribs of the leaf. I can start with a little patch of green, but that's going to blend into my yellow. So I've just built up a bank of green there, whereupon the wild thyme grows, and then to show you where the yellow comes, I'm then going to come in with my yellow pencil, and I can do it, at the moment I can do it quite hard. I can do just like a patch of yellow above, but then I'm going to blend them together so that the transition point isn't too stark. So I put some yellow down, so now each of the leaves has got a sort of green. If you just look at this section here, I don't know if I can get, we can just see a little bit closer in. We can see hopefully that on these leaves you've got like a little bit of green at the bottom and then a sort of yellow section. And I don't want that to be such a harsh point, so I can get my green again and where just start to overlap just lightly over that yellow section, enough to let the yellow gleam through a bit in the over the green, so that I get a much softer division between the two, so it becomes like a sort of, you get like a green and then a pale green and then into yellow. So it just softens it down a bit, so it's not too, I say I'm trying to avoid that sort of stripy look. I want it to be quite a soft, delicate blend sort of moving through. So obviously I've put some yellow up here and I've blended it into the green, so now I've got to have yellow coming all the way across in my stripe going across. And I do hope it's starting to make sense more what we're doing. It's not sort of, because it's a really weird one to explain, because it feels like it's one of those things that the more you explain it, the more complicated it sounds. And it's actually not overly complicated if you just think about the rhythm of what you're trying to do and sort of imagine these stripes going through the whole piece, and then it's not, but it's really difficult to explain, and I feel like I've been sort of like stumbling around and repeating myself and trying to find ways to describe what I'm doing, when it's probably one of those occasions where I should just shut up and draw, and then you'll see it develops. So I've got back down to the green here. See on this spiral, I'm just going back into some blue because I want that green and blue transition to be quite sort of soft. This spiral coming down here, which at the moment is white, I think I'm going to actually colour that in yellow so that it's got a sudden flash of yellow being a contrast, because there's no reason you can't play with this occasionally. So where that yellow comes in, that's just giving that little spiral a nice kick of contrast against the green, against the bluey sort of section. So if I keep on going this way now across these shapes here, so these ones here are all very much green and blue, so I'm going to definitely sort of put some green into those horseshoes up there, and bring those across into that sort of leaf up round there, and then I can come back with my yellow again. So I'm going to sort of come in again, maybe not completely on top of, like right next to the green, but maybe a tiny, so I can blend my green into it, but definitely get the yellow in, starting to come across these shapes, and of course eventually they're going to turn into, the next one will be going into orange and going into red, and then of course we reverse it and go back the other way. But that depends how big your image gets, and if you get it going, you can kind of get this whole changing from one colour to the other across a whole sheet, which is quite a deeply satisfying thing to achieve, I can assure you, which I hope you will manage, because it's one of those ones that when you look up and you're going to go, oh gosh, that looks good. So I've got my yellow stripe going all the way across there. I need to get my yellow coming in to the bottom as well, so I'm going to tilt the camera down. So again, let's sort of start getting some yellow into, I'm going slightly below my green, and then I'm going to blend the two sort of to reach out, so across the centre of that flower and then into that petal. And why I like these sort of double lines for this sort of design is that you can kind of play around with it. So where you've got these like two lines here, you can kind of get quite a bright yellow in it, and then you can kind of hint at, like, you can put a green in on apparently the wrong side of it, but then you can put yellow over the top to warm up that green, and then back into the yellow, and then that yellow we're going to come into orange. You can just like get little moments where you don't quite follow the rules, and that kind of like brings out some of the detail in the design. It sort of allows you to play with that and make it a bit more obvious. And you can sort of say, well, I don't want to have the same colour on an outline as I have got in a centre, so I'm just going to, so that like here where you've got a sort of petal here, if that's going to have a green outline, I might take that all the way around being green, and maybe up a little bit into that blue section, and I might even decide to come back and have a little hint of like reflective colour of blue into that yellow petal. You know, it doesn't have to be completely rigid, but you know, as long as you've got the overall kind of journey is travelling in the right direction. So I can bring my yellow across and through here. So again, you might just want to sort of go across and put a little piece of yellow to establish where your stripe is going, and then go back over the top and play with the blend and decide where you want to, how subtle you want it to be. So like it, you know, you might then go back and add some little highlights and details and things. So like on this spiral here, because remember I've got this spiral coming in yellow, with this one I've got the background is more yellow, so I'm going to get some blue and just make that spiral be into blue, just to add a little quirky contrast. So again, once I've got my yellow in roughly, I can then go back and think about where the yellow is going to transition, or the green is going to transition into yellow. So as I come back over, I can leave little bits of white to be highlight. I can add some like greens, and then work over the top with yellows, just to sort of keep quite a subtle blend happening. So that this bit here, I'm just working the green down into the yellow. If it goes too far, I can grab my yellow and come back and warm up the green with it. I might put a tiny hint of yellow into there, and then maybe blend it in with the blue, so that it gets a different, because obviously if you mix yellow and blue, you're going to get a green that's sort of, and there's a bit of green in there as well. So I said you don't have to be totally rigid about the colour transitions. You can have a little bit of fun with them, as long as the sort of the movement is heading in an overall controlled direction. You know, it doesn't have to be totally rigid. And like up here where I've got these little ones with their little, I've deliberately left, and these green ones here, I've left a little tiny bit of white. So I'm going to go in and almost use that yellow as a little moment of highlight, just as sort of as if it's reflecting some of the yellow above, kind of as if it's a little surface that can do that. And then definitely come back in with some green. So it's just like a way of, you're using the pattern the whole time, but you're also thinking about the image as a whole. So it's working around the pattern, but it's not maybe following it in the conventional sense of this bit is red and this bit is blue. You know, you're sort of playing with it. And of course you can totally do other colour combinations. You know, we've gone for the classic rainbow tonight because it's one that everyone understands, but you could limit it and just do it in sort of hot tones or cool tones, or, you know, have a different go at it, just do all different shades, but to still get this kind of transition across a whole piece effect. So obviously I would go through and blend all this section into and see that I was happy with where it's going, but I'm going to just focus in on these leaves up here, because then I can show you kind of how it blends up into the red and the orange sections, because I'd like to want to get some of those hot colours in as well in the last sort of quarter of an hour. So then, of course, where you've got your yellow here, so I'm going to come in and I'm going to put my orange blend in. But I'm going to start it again just so that at the moment I'm leaving a little tiny amount of white between the orange and the yellow, because I'm going to sort of do a crossover in that section. So I'm just putting a little bit of orange in above my yellow, and then I'm going to go back and sort of build the yellow up and cross over the orange and blend them together. Now, of course, ideally I would have got all of this covered in pattern. There'd be some pattern behind these leaves, so eventually if I get, you know, if we were to go back and continue, we just get more pattern, and then we'd have to just see where the colours are. So this section here, whatever pattern it was, would probably be orange, because it's sort of where my orange stripe is coming across. So let's just get that, sort of just take that across, so you can see it's, again, it's still, it's doing its direction across the whole piece. So it's using the shape, but it's also ignoring it at the same time. So there's my orange blend coming in, and I can overlap with some yellow just to work into that orange, so that ideally what I'm getting is sort of like an in-between, a tiny bit of in-between colour, like, you know, an orange and a dark yellow, I suppose, an ochre yellow, sort of like an orangey yellow in between. And then I've got my nice strong orange, and of course the next thing is it's going to come into red. It's going to have, so I can get the tip of my red in, and I can then blend my orange into it. And this is when we want nice sharp colour pencils, and just get those sort of, so it's starting to look quite like autumnal colours, almost the way you get that lovely transition through the leaves, which will be starting fairly soon. But when you get moments where you've got trees where they're sort of halfway going, where, you know, one half is still green and then you get sort of the tops has gone through yellow and is heading towards red, that sort of feeling. So I've just done that in that corner. Obviously I would carry that across the whole piece, but I just wanted to try and get all of the colours in one section going through and blending through. And this one, again, once I've got the red in, I can bring the orange up into it, so I'm sort of recolouring the orange and then continuing that colouring up into the red, and just getting so that it's got a nice sort of organic feel to the blend. It's not too stark. So it's why you don't actually need to have your entire colour box of 120 colour pencils that, you know, you've been lusting after on whatever site you get your art materials from. If you blend carefully, as if you work over the top when you layer your colour pencils, you'll find that you'll be able to create lots of different shades just by varying the pressure and the layering that you use to sort of blend these together. And you're still working inside the shape, so not just randomly colouring over the top of your lines. You still think about the lines that you've drawn and the patterns that are there, but then use them as the sort of starting point and get your blend of colours coming through. So see, that's done. So hopefully there you can see you've got that nice sort of blend happening through there, and you can go back and decide that, you know, maybe you want to get that blue looking stronger in that sort of section. Maybe you want to bring some more green. You know, it's just sort of like stepping back once you've got your basic areas established of colour, and deciding if you want to get a little hint of highlight somewhere else. and a little bit of reflected colour, maybe taking it up a bit higher into some areas. So as we come down this way, let's see if we can got enough time. Oh, I've dropped the yellow. I've got enough time to come this way a bit so we can get the full kind of slice. So on this side down here, we've got yellow, haven't we? So let's get a tiny bit more yellow into these sections. If you can hear strange ethereal piano music in the background, my cat is walking on the piano keys. I don't know if that's coming through or not, but it's surprisingly loud where I am. But he's decided to give me the classic kitten 2 note. Right, so then I would come in with my orange and just start to getting some hints of that orange. So in these little sections here, they're definitely going to be orange. Definitely going to bring those through, and then I can use it like a little bit of shadow behind there and just bring that through. So I'm starting to get that, again, that sort of blend would be across the whole piece. And it's going to come this way a bit as well, so that would be orange in there. I'm going to confess that one night the cat did decide to run up and down the piano keys in the middle of the night at about 2 in the morning, and that was like being woken up in a horror movie. I was thinking, my God, what on earth is going on? The ghosts are in. But yes, so bless him for his musical tendencies. Yeah, so I'm just bringing that, and again that would come across the whole piece, but again I'm just going to focus in on this section here because I want to kind of get the red to appear here as well, so we can get that full spectrum sort of effect. And then I know I'm going to bring some red into here, so I might just still put a few hints of orange below just to kind of get that across. And still think about, so like in this shape here, that orange now kind of becomes the more highlight piece, so that when I come in with the red, that can come in under here and that starts to look a bit like a shadow. So you can still think about the way you want to get some three-dimensionality into this as well, if you get really keen on this. And I can just blend that red in there, and again, it can come up, can follow the shape of the flower, so it can sort of creep up into that area. It's gone straight into the sort of yellow there, so I might come back with orange and just make that conjunction, that sort of junction point, just soften that down with orange, so we're going sort of from one into the other. So then we're just starting to see, hopefully you're getting that whole sort of slice effect, and that's coming through the whole piece. So I get that red centre in and into those sort of petals, and that red would come across again in a stripe. So again, just to sort of, so you're clear, eventually I would take this orange all the way across here and the red all the way across here, and the same here, you'd have red and we'd have orange. I wouldn't just keep it in sort of one section. I'd try and continue with this idea of these sort of flash of colour. So it's both working with the pattern and also slightly ignoring the pattern, sort of like doing a bit of both, depending on how the mood takes you. And there we go, and a little bit sort of under there. That's it. And of course, once I've got all the red done here, I would then be coming back into my orange zone almost straight away, because I would then be sort of reversing it and coming back across, going the other way. So if I can just get some orange into here, I need to get a little bit more yellow, I think, into this here, but I can take my orange across, because I've got sort of like a diagonal. I mean, it's not a very straight line. You can be as free form as you like with the line. You could get a ruler and be really, really sort of strict and do proper, you know, very straight lines, but I think sort of a line in the loosest sense of the word is fine. And then you would see a bit of the red coming across. Again, I'm just going to do a little hint of it so you can kind of see how it would go, and then I would go back and blend it in together and make it really smooth. But sometimes just patching the little bits of colour across just helps you get a sense of where you're going and that it's all going in the right area. And I can just bring that, across there. That one probably. And then on my spirals up here that I've got, I think I would probably aim to get that little bit in red in there. And that maybe those sort of bits too. And it's come through, and then I can kind of come back with some orange. So hopefully we're seeing this sort of really lovely rainbow shimmer kind of building up, and you can see that as I come away from the red, I'm going straight back into the sort of orange zone, because I'm now sort of going to go back down through the rainbow. So I'm going to go red, orange, yellow away this way, and eventually down here I'll be back down to the lilac-y purple, lilac and violet kind of bit. So I can then take this is going back into orange. So I couldn't go all the way up in this one because I've run out of pattern, but you can see how then the red is a definite sort of stripe through it. And this is one of those classes where I feel like we've only just started and almost coming to the end. It's just one of those ones where, you know, you just want to keep going, you do loads and loads on it, but we're going to have to bring it to a close there. But I hope you can see, you know, you can have so much fun with this as a kind of colour treatment. So you've got this overall sweep of the rainbow kind of going across, and you could certainly do this with any kind of colours that you wanted to play with. You could do ones in loads of pinks and lilacs and all those sort of tonal ones blending together, or you could do, you know, there's just endless scope for things. But what you're doing is kind of using your pattern and also not using it at the same time, sort of working with it and also imposing your colours on it. And it's just another way of playing with the pattern and creating another exciting doodle element. So there we go. That is, if I pull back a bit, you can sort of get the overall effect, hopefully coming across really nicely, of our overall rainbow doodle.